Welcome everybody. I'm Bobby Hackett. I'm at the Bonner Foundation. I'm literally at the Bonner Foundation. Nobody else is here. This is Mrs. Bonner's old office. This is not how I decorate, although it's a very beautiful space. Her portrait's on the wall over there, and we have a big backyard. But more, if you were here, you would have had your opening dinner as a picnic out in the side yard here. And we would be walking over to the Princeton Seminary, which is just a block away. So Arlette's done that before, so I'll pretend like that's what we're doing. So let me just shift here to a little bit of the program history. And let me get a show of hands. How many of you have watched the history video? Okay, not all of you. So if you've watched it, you can take a little break.
Bonner is something different.
This
Can you hear it?
Serving soup and leaving for the day. It's thinking about why that line gets longer and how that relates to policy.
Being a Bonner has meant that I get to share my story.
Giving my all to something I firmly believe in.
It means everybody coming together for a common goal, for something really awesome.
It's a community of people who are passionate about loving and serving others.
And I think that really transforms your service experience from something that's just something that you do to part of who you are.
It's just something that seems so right to do.
I mean, it's a power story of two people, you know, that grew up both dirt poor and both kind of have this, again, simple but strong faith. It was really important to Mr. Bonner that he wanted to be involved with people that really needed something. He had two things in mind. One was to help the person that was hurting, and the other was to displace despair with opportunity.
Mrs. Bonner was very actively involved both in Florida and then here in Princeton in helping other people. And of course, the food banks came up early in that.
Mr. Bonner and I both worked. Nothing was given to us. We earned it all.
Mr. Bonner had, I think it was a challenging home environment.
By the age of 13, he had left school and to help out with the family.
Mr. Bonner was a real estate developer and had real estate projects in Florida and Virginia and New York City and New Jersey.
And he used to say to me that it's payback time.
I think during the Depression, he got hit hard. And like some people after that, you know, bounced back. But it's, I'm convinced that, you know, the experience of how he grew up, the experience of kind of going through loss and disappointment and failure and then coming back up. And then, you know, certainly Mrs. Bonner's story.
I was born in Eagan, Tennessee. From there, I went to Kentucky in the mining area. Mother had a restaurant. She also leased a building that was, she used as a hotel. 4 o'clock in the morning, we'd open the restaurant. 8 o'clock, I'd go to school. I'd come back at noon and help her at lunch.
And just the violence, she talks about a man being shot and killed in front of her and seeing that and kind of leaving the scene with her mom, you know, in the middle of the night and getting the train, having to make a decision. Do we go to Louisiana, to New Orleans, or do we go to Detroit? And she said that, you know, she had seen a magazine that had a picture of J.B. Hudson, which is the jeweler in Detroit. And she said to her mother, if there must be jobs here because people aren't wearing nice clothes.
She was working in kind of food services in Detroit, and that she worked at the Statler Hotel.
She was working at the Statler in Detroit, and they brought her to New York.
I met Mr. Bonner in New York at a dinner party where we both were, and he was with someone else, and so was I, but he learned where I was working, so he made it a point to come in and say, "Good morning." Would you like to go to a hockey game next Sunday? I said, "Sorry, I'm busy. How about the following Sunday?" So he said, "All right, following Sunday."
Mr. Bonner used to take her to ball games, to go to the Yankees.
There's a story where the doctor who Mr. Bonner worked with was examining Mrs. Bonner and came back and spoke to Mr. Bonner and said, you need her a lot more than she needs you. I think Mr. Bonner at that point was a millionaire. And that doctor, I think, spoke to something Mr. Bonner had already figured out.
She was definitely the wind beneath his wings.
Well, I'd love to see him happy because he was so serious most of the time. I frequently would say, could I have a smile, please?
And then 1989, Mr. Bonner calls me and he says he's hired some other kid to help him. And that was Wayne.
I saw Mr. Bonner a couple times, kind of in my 20s, while I was doing this along with Bobby Hackett, trying to kind of rebuild a student movement around community service. But he was impatient about it too. He's like, yeah, okay, so what? So what's next?
Mr. Bonner had a request to make the contributions to Berea, which we did. Dr. Stevenson came up to talk to Mr. Bonner. He was so impressed that after a couple of years of making contributions, he wanted to do more.
I just remember when the conversation, the words, the Bonner Scholar Program, came up. It was like, boom, it was it.
Wayne recognized that you could sort of take the Berea model, which is a work college, a work model, and take that work and make it service.
We did the first year at Berea. There were 80 students in the first class. So there was just this huge kind of volume and, creativity and chaos.
And Mr. Bonner was impatient because of his age and because he figured out, I like this model, so let's get going. And so 11 schools were chosen to be part of the second round.
And so there's this great meeting at the Boone Tavern Inn.
Davidson was invited to go when I was there. It was about 10 other college presidents. And we talked about this, and this was really kind of right down our alley as far as I was concerned. The fact that here were going to be some students who had this kind of in their guts to be servants in the larger community.
If you invest in these students, not only will they get access to education and do their service, but they will actually sort of transform both the campus and the community.
I remember distinctly after Mr. Bonner's death, getting a call saying, did I know what Mrs. Bonner plans to do?
I had no idea. I didn't know what was going to go. I didn't know if I was going to have a job.
And I said, I think she plans to come to the office Monday morning and continue working.
Yeah, Mrs. Bonner came in and she sat down and she was like, Wayne, anything I need to know?
She stepped into something that she was completely briefed on. They had decided all these things together. She knew all the stories.
She, in connection with that, visited, my recollection, almost every school.
I would say to down to 6 schools in a week and a half, and she'd say, "Oh, I'm fine."
When Billy Bonner came to campus, oh my, she was such a magnet.
And they loved her immediately. She loved them back immediately.
She was a beloved woman to all the students.
It was certainly spiritual, if not magical.
She had the strongest, firmest handshake. She'd shake their hands and say, stay in school, graduate. That was her refrain.
We're doing it from the bottom of our hearts, not because we expect anything from them except get your education and finish 4 years.
The things we had imagined in our wildest dreams happening close to 25 years ago have happened, are in the process of happening.
We very much had this idea of that college students can make a difference in the world and they shouldn't wait.
But fundamentally, the reason it worked is look what was happening to these students. Look who they were, look at their backgrounds, the challenges they'd overcome to even get to college, and look what they were becoming right before people's eyes. And that's a magic of service and giving of yourself. That impact was happening right away.
I am able to use my education to make a difference in other people's lives, but I'm also able to use what I learned through my service in my class.
It's different because no one's there to pad a resume.
It has been this unexpected journey.
Everywhere civic engagement is, Bonner's there.
Bonner, for me, makes my education possible.
I really appreciate that I can be a Bonner.
It's actually shapes my career choice.
Bonner to me is Bonner love.
Yay. All right, so we're a little behind, but that's completely okay. Because that was more important than anything I'm going to say. You saw all right dancing, everybody? All right, I'm going to just cover a couple quick slides on the rest of the history part, and then we're going to pose the next question for the breakout. So clearly the motto is access to education, opportunity to serve. The target audience were people like the Bonners, folks who wanted to go to college, maybe were able to do some college, but weren't able to afford to go all the way through. It was Wayne Meisel's good idea to sort of look at the Berea model as a work college and say, why don't we link that work, and in case work study, to service? And that's become the Bonner model. Because the work study rules changed, that meant a lot of other schools could also adopt the model. So we've been doing that for a long time. Mrs. Bonner's feeling was, let's help as many people as we possibly can. And that's what we've been able to do. There are there are twice as many leader schools as the original scholar schools. About 10 years into the program, we came up with what we call the common commitments. And these are ideas, things that people knew we cared about and were sort of working towards. And they are very simply civic engagement, and I'm not going to read all this stuff, community building, diversity. Now my screen's in the way. So civic engagement, international perspective, and spiritual exploration. Some people wonder if we're a Christian foundation, and we're not, even though we have a program called Crisis Ministry. But 85% of students, one of their motivations is religious or spiritual. So that became core to us. We've also cared very much about this concept of this issue around wellness. It wasn't one of the original, which is why it's not there, but so hold on, I'm having a little trouble with my screen here. What's going on here? So I'm gonna have the breakout question right now, real quick. So just another quick one. I'm gonna try to do it so that it's broken up a little bit. But the question is, what part of the Bonner program do you find most compelling? So if you're a new school that's been hearing about it, you're kind of, what is it that's drawing you in? If you're someone who was in the program, just it's equally good question. Obviously, you've been running the program for almost a year. Really interested in your perspective around what is it you find most compelling. And I'm going to try to do the breakout rooms again where I can recreate. And let's see. Again, we'll do about 3 to 4 per room. Welcome back. All right, I'm gonna whip through the Bonner program model slides, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Rachita to look at the sort of the impact of Bonner. Let me just walk through these briefly. I think you all know by now a Bonner is a student typically who demonstrates significant financial need. In the leader model and the scholar model, not every student has to be on financial aid, although they all have to get the same financial support. So in other words, if they're all getting stipends in the Bonner Leader Program, they all deserve stipends at the same exact level. It's a program with lots of diverse students from many different backgrounds, and very significantly, it's a 4-year commitment for these students. You're all aware of that. When they what do? They join a team. That's a key part of the program, the cohort dimension. They develop and grow as agents of change. They're doing this every day, every week, every semester, even most of them in the summers. We really sort of view the partnerships, and we'll get into this in another session, as primarily community driven. So there are certainly instances where students are initiating their own programming, but we're primarily focused on responding to community partner requests, and that whole relationship is pretty critical. to us. These students are absolutely connecting their service and their studies. Many change their majors as they go through. Lots of guys end up become teachers, for instance. And when they graduate, we know there's some data and also other surveys and other sorts of connections. They stay involved. They're very much engaged in this kind of work over time. This next slide, I'm going to do it in the more fancy way. So what are the elements of the program? What you see here, by the way, is this sort of an updated, as of a couple years ago, developmental model with the blue representing training, the orange, the green direct service, the yellow service leadership, helping coordinate things. The orange is the project-based work, either capacity building projects or social action projects. And that red is a culminating reflection. And the orange, we want students to culminate their time in Bonner and in college with a culminating project. The exact percentages, you can ignore those. This is sort of more suggestive of how the program is developing. So in terms of running the program, the pathway, first you got to find them. And we'll talk more about that in another session. But we want you to draw the students to your school because they get the opportunity to be in the Bonner program. You're going to do a lot of training and education over those 4 years. And we have a lot of material. It's up to you to decide how to put it together, but we give you lots of best practices and resources for that. Obviously, the placements are huge. And those are in startups. You start with just your freshmen, so you have a more limited group to work with. But you're finding partners who are eager and willing to have the students develop over their 4 years. They don't have to stay at that partnership all 4 years, but it's an opportunity for them to think about roles students can have beyond the entry-level positions that so many students are part of. We're using service leadership roles very broadly defined. So it could be coordinating a program. It could be how to coordinate the Bonner program, this senior intern role. It could be being on a leadership, the Bonner leadership team itself with class reps and other roles students end up developing. Again, we have resources on that because we're not a cookie cutter. How you and your students put these things together is up to you guys. The capacity building and social action kind of project work is relatively new for us in terms of a more deliberate focus on resource development. On the social action, we're primarily doing that through academic courses. We're working with schools to try to develop those. The capacity building project work, it's ongoing for us. This summer, our interns spent a lot of time developing material on that step-by-step guides that we'll be sharing in about a week. The senior presentations is this culminating reflection. So that's part and parcel. That blue, this training and education reflections goes on the whole time. Some schools have really developed very elaborate and intentional process for that. Some more and more are doing e-portfolios. And this is the kind of area that Bonner becomes, all these things, frankly, but this is one of the areas where Bonner becomes a model for the rest of the campus to look at as they try to advocate for those same kinds of activities for all students. And then there's, of course, getting students to graduate. Oh, actually, let me just continue with this slideshow the way I was doing it. So big question is, why does it work? And we all have our theories. Let me tell you mine, since I get to be the presenter. This represents, normally I would ask people to raise their hand and say, what does this represent? But this is, the color scheme is the giveaway. This is 10 hours a week for a full semester. And Bonners do that for 4 years. Oops. Bonners do that for 4 years, and most of them do it in the summers. And their roles in the summers begin to evolve too. They do more project-based stuff as time goes on. And if they do all 3 summers, all 4 years, if they do that full amount, they're doing almost 2,000 hours of engagement in 4 years. That's a year's employment. In that sense, this is one of the most robust internship programs going. And I think that's the single most important thing. But coupled with that is they're part of a cohort. They're part of this group of other Bonners who are going through this experience together. As freshmen, they're meeting seniors and juniors and sophomores, all who have the same commitments they have, who may have different backgrounds and do this in different areas. And it's a very powerful model. The research shows this. And this is a graduating group at one of our schools. They have a big banquet. This is the key, right? It's this intensity, and it's doing it with a large group of students that makes an enormous difference. Now I'm going to, oh, why else does it work? There's one last thing. This is actually pretty critical. It works because of you guys. This quote comes from well, Bob Sigmund was one of the early folks in service learning, and we worked with us for as a consultant to visit this original group of 11 schools, and he wrote this report. This is in 1992, so the program was a year and a half old, barely. It was, just a beginning. And he wrote a bunch of things there that were predictive of what was going to happen. But this is the one I think is really critical for you all to recognize in terms of your role. Program directors and coordinators are also finding a stretch in their associations as they necessarily have to become program developers, political strategists, communicators across many boundaries, counselors, learners themselves, wisdom figures, interpreters, planners, and problem solvers. That's you guys. The community partners play a role in that too, because they're great allies. They are some of the strongest mentors of your students. Those are the things that make the Bonner program work and successful. Those are the things that enable us to kind of have these kind of impacts. And it's ongoing. And I did this in a different order, so I put that compelling thing first, which is why we're a lot of, so I'm gonna jump to the next slide and have Rachita speak, and Rachita, just tell me when to go to the next slide.
Yes.
So here we're gonna talk about some of the data and information around program impact.
Yeah, so I'll mainly talk about the program's impact in 3 areas: impact on students, impact on school campuses, and impact in communities. So every year, the Bonner Foundation conducts a survey in which first-year students and senior students participate. And so in 2009, we also invited outside researchers to analyze these survey results. And if you want to look at the full report, the article, it is available on Bonner Learning Community, but I'm just going to highlight some key findings. So when they looked at the developmental journey, they found significant difference in terms of students' commitment to civic engagement and social justice between their first year and their 4th year. So this, the model, that 4-year commitment to community engagement is a significant factor in the success of this program and in student learning. The second aspect that's very important is dialogue across difference. So as Bobby mentioned, students also engage in weekly training and education and reflection sessions, and they get multiple opportunities to learn how to listen carefully, how to handle difference of opinions, how to understand a person from a diverse background. And they also learn all these things also when they are at their community organization serving people. So through this training and community service, they get lots of opportunities to understand what it means to have a dialogue across difference, and that helps with their skill building activities. With their skills. And the findings indicated that this 4-year commitment enhanced their commitment to social justice and their civic values. Could we go to the next slide? And these Bonner students, they also take many leadership roles. They are also very active in other student organizations. So they help a lot in building a culture of service for the entire campus. And when, one of the requirements of the program is to recruit students from diverse backgrounds, especially underprivileged backgrounds. So diversity and access is one of the values of the program. And when Bonner students are recruited, it's the same idea that also goes across the campus. And also another finding was about the academic service learning courses. So what the research has found is that when there are just 1 or 2 service learning courses, it does not contribute significantly to students' sense of commitment to social justice or civic engagement. But when it's a combination of curricular and co-curricular experiences, when they have this training and reflection throughout, when there are mentors to guide them throughout the process, it helps them a lot. So it's the same idea campus-wide. So when we have certificate programs, we are trying to integrate curricular and co-curricular experiences through which students can learn. So it's a campus-wide engagement, and we are changing the culture of the campus. Could we go to the last slide? So this is just one example how Bonner program would look like on a campus, on a school campus. And Bobby, feel free to add to this. But the idea is that we'll start from the bottom. So the idea is that a few Bonner students will initiate or organize one-day service event for the entire campus, and they will involve let's say 450 students from the entire school for this one-day service events. So that's the beginning of spreading awareness about this value of engaging with the community. Then there are Bonner students who also engage in weekly service. And as they move through their years from first year to sophomore to junior to senior, they start taking leadership roles. So they may take volunteer coordinator role with their service organization. So they not only train small group of Bonner students, but they also train other volunteers at the community service site. And then they engage in internships during summer with that community organization. And then when they are in their junior and senior years, they have constant discussions with these community supervisors, and they try to identify what these community needs are. And they build capacity building projects. They work on capacity building projects. So it could be needs assessment for a program or a program evaluation, or developing a new curriculum for community organizations after school program. So this way they are building capacity of that organization. And we also have social action projects. Some students are engaged with that. Professor Scott Myers-Lipton, he is teaching social action courses, and some Bonner students who attended their sessions, they have started implementing social action campaigns and courses in their respective Bonner programs. Bobby, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I'm gonna, we'll talk in a session on community partnerships and get into this in more depth. I mean, the idea here is, it frankly, partly is to think about not just the volume of work that happens or highlight some certain examples, but to actually be able to count and document the categories of engagement. We may not always be able to indicate that reading levels went up as a result of student engagement, but we can't talk about how many after-school programs are being run on a weekly basis by college students or engaged in that. So we'll get more into that later. But I think one of the key points here is that Bonners, in their duration with a community partner, by being there 6, 7, 8 hours a week, week after week, semester after semester, really completely changed the way the community partner views what a college student or team of college students can do with their organization. And that sort of, that shift then is a by example, as also by way of the sort of service leadership role itself, are very concrete ways. Having a Bonner program helps it strengthen and broaden the kind of impact that's happening in the communities, both directly and indirectly with the Bonners there. I'm going to pause for a second and ask folks to use the chat now, starting now, to begin to pose any questions for what you're hearing. Every one of these categories we're going to go into more depth in all the subsequent sessions. So this is meant to be a big picture sort of overview. But it would be interesting to hear some of those. I went out of order, so the flow of hearing a lot and having a breakout got mixed up. That's typical of me. I was so excited to hear what you found compelling. I'm going to give you a couple of the thoughts we have around Bonner in terms of its role as a campus-wide strategy and a community partnership strategy. Repeat some of the stuff I've already said, frankly, but I just want to touch on that, and then we will we'll be ready to sort of answer some of those questions and give you a preview of the rest of the agenda. And then maybe if we have time to give you a quick tour of the Bonner Learning Community platform for those of you who are new at it. So in this case, I'm going to go back to that play mode because it makes it a little more fun for me. So here's how Bonner's a goal and strategy. We have these, one of the key things with us is we don't think of the student development outcomes without thinking about the community partnership outcomes and how they connect to each other. We believe you can't have the highest community partner outcome without students working on an equally high level. The same with student development. You can't have students get the greatest development they can in college doing this kind of work without having them work on very high level projects with partners. You can't get either of those if you don't have the infrastructure on campuses. Your offices, your centers, the faculty who teach courses that connect into this, and a whole bunch of other things that we'll talk about. We'll give previews during these this orientation, but are the kind of things we're doing ongoing work on. So it's very integrated. We think of this stuff in a very tightly integrated way. Our goals, and I'm going to go through this very quickly. It's not just for the Bonners, just not just that one group of students. We're trying to engage the whole campus. Bonner's a program, but there's other programs, courses. I probably should redo this slide so the word courses is there too, because we have to work through the curriculum as well to get both the volume of folks engaged, but also, frankly, just in a co-curricular setting, we can't get the depth of analysis and knowledge development and skill development students need to make a real change in the community. The campus center has been a focus. Most of our campuses did not have a center when we started 30 years ago. Some campuses, centers are fairly new. Some are about to emerge. One of the schools I'm talking to is finally starting their formal center, a larger civic engagement center just now. And then we think about how do we leverage the whole network to look at higher ed as a whole. And I think in this way, I think the Bonner program, the Bonner network, is kind of research and development. We're a tight-knit group. We have lots of autonomy in how we exercise and develop our programs, but we have a common set of frameworks, a common set of tools. We have these students in common, and we have one another as a group to learn from. And I think that's when we've had a disproportionate impact on in higher ed, I think. I'm not bragging here. I probably am bragging a little bit, but I think we've had a bigger impact than one might think because of the nature of the way this network comes together. From the community partner side, it's the same kind of thing, right? We're sort of working to help individuals in tutoring programs, in feeding programs, and ones that visit the elderly and those kinds of things. We're also helping staff those programs. We're helping organizations build their capacity to do this kind of work. But we're also looking to system change. And what's happening in the racial justice area is people are looking at systemic racism. And that requires an analysis. And it requires a depth of engagement in understanding and thinking and researching and dialogue that's different than just racial injustice from an individual standpoint, just you and me. And it's that kind of systemic view, whether we have to change policies or whether we're really going to work on other structural changes in the systems that lead to racial injustice, that lead to poverty, that lead to environmental degradation. Those are the kinds of things that we think that higher ed needs to be engaged in, and that if we're doing our job at the highest level, the stuff on the left is connecting to all the stuff on the right here. So we think of this as, again, another way of thinking about how it's integrated. We refer to these as our transformational goals. The strategic goals, the simplest way we're talking about it right now to sort of sum it up is that we want 100% of Bonners to do a community engaged capstone project. If they're doing that, all that we are helping them reach their highest level. So all the things we've talked about so far, in a way you could say they crystallize, they culminate in that capstone project. Community defined in most cases. It could be a social action, it could be building capacity. It could be working with not just a service providing organization, but a collaborative, and we'll talk more about those kind of things later. From a campus-wide standpoint, we're saying to schools, our goal for you is that between 20 and 25% of all your graduates will do a community engaged capstone level project. We say level rather than actual credit bearing capstone because that's not going to be possible for some group of students. But we think this 20-25% is not a crazy number because we think that easily that percentage of students on your campuses would be motivated to do this kind of work, are motivated to do this kind of work. We just haven't had the structures to be able to mobilize that large a number. So this helps crystallize for me the issue of quality. Doing Bonner well helps you think about how to do this well for more students. But doing this for more students begins to crystallize the challenge around scale. How do we do this in a major way? So I think the way we think about Bonner is the Bonner, we pilot it, right? We pilot this with Bonners. If you've got 60 Bonners, there you go. You pilot with those Bonners. I don't know how I have 65 there. I guess 65 is a campus-wide number. And then the Bonner program, then you take those lessons and then you get everybody. Well, how about that for a graphic, huh? I worked for hours on that one. That's kind of our, this is in a nutshell what we're trying to do from a campus-wide standpoint. In terms of the work we do with you, we think about the centers, we think about the roles of not just the Bonner program, but how faculty fit in, student affairs, other offices, and of course your community partners. We have material and we're having discussions, not so much at this orientation meeting, but around the campus-wide infrastructure, the staffing, how you encourage and support student-led campus-wide engagement, how we work with collaboration across campuses. If you're new to higher ed, running a Bonner program is probably the best thing you can do because you'll have to work with and have the opportunity to work with every office on campus. We do a lot of stuff on faculty development and helping develop courses and curriculum, particularly now in the context of pathways, multi-year engagement. We work with schools on strategic planning across the campus. Publicity is an important part of what you're doing in your center, obviously fundraising, and then tracking and reporting. This is all the kind of stuff we'll be talking about a little bit during this meeting, but certainly being connected to the Bonner program and network. The question I have, and I think I'm gonna pose the question, but I don't think we're gonna go on a breakout first. Let's try to get the other stuff covered. And if we have time, we'll go to the breakout. But the question is, we're sort of curious about what your primary goals are. Oh, I'm sorry. This question is actually on the Bonner Learning Community. So I'm gonna run through how the Bonner Learning Community is set up. And I believe this question is, will get released right at the right time. I think right at the end of this meeting, and show up in your email box. We're asking for a written response. So just real quickly on the agenda. Today, we're doing the welcome and introductions. Tomorrow at 10, a little earlier. These are all Eastern time. We're gonna do the student development and training. We spend a lot of time talking about frameworks, so you sort of get the bigger structures. The details get filled in over time. We're gonna meet again on Friday at 11 again. This time, sort of these key components of Bonner, what we end up calling cornerstone activities. An extended orientation, a first year service trip, sophomore exchange, and you can see the other items there. On Monday, we'll talk about community partnerships. I'm gonna lead that one. That'll be in Monday afternoon. And then we get skip Tuesday, and we're gonna have 2 sessions on Wednesday, one at 10 a.m., talking about sort of management programs, staffing, those kinds of things. There's a little, we'll touch a little bit on sort of how Bonner tends to fit into the campus-wide centers. And then Wednesday afternoon, we'll talk about, we're calling it tracking and accountability, but this actually covers some of those kind of questions, as well as how people are doing annual reports, and then a variety of kind of stuff we do around foundation support for folks. The Bonner Learning Community Quick Tour, I'm just gonna take you on that right now. All right, so the Bonner Learning Community is this platform. We've started doing it maybe about a year ago or so. We're still kind of learning it and how to make it effective for us in our work. It has this sort of news feed, which is a little bit like a Facebook type thing. There's these opening parts here. We have a lot of people in there now in our network. Lots of students, certainly most of the staff. The kind of questions we pose, you'll see there. When we pose a question, we can tag it to a folder. So it's kind of like a way of having a email listserv, but have sort of categories where we can post stuff. We will have all the events. So all these sessions are up here. Other things we're doing via Zoom right now, or we'll be up here. We have some stuff by groups. We haven't done much with this yet, but we would urge you when you do your profile to identify which of these groups which of these roles you have on campus. We're just beginning to figure out how to organize the groups more effectively. We're looking to do some specific stuff this fall with the Bonner leadership team and senior interns. We've been doing some stuff already with faculty. We'll figure out how to fit you guys in, use this effectively. A lot of time though has been on these webinars or webinar series really. And here we have this meeting, which I think most of you have seen. I'm gonna go back to that in a second. But we have some other ones. This summer I've been, and these are just the featured ones. This summer I've been leading a group of students doing policy research. We have a Teach and Social Action webinar series we've been doing. There's, Ari's had some great stuff with Rachita and Liz on working with faculty, communicating learning. We've had a guest series. And here, by the way, you can go in and watch the old slides. I mean, watch the old sessions. And there's a whole bunch of new stuff coming in next. Just to go back to this particular meeting though, this starts with a table of contents. We set that as the default, and this default is all the sessions and the material that'll go with each of them. We also have here topics where when we pose a question, we'll flag it to a topic. This is where, and you can see it here as well. Here's the opening session. So I think at 12:30, you'll get this, the next question gets posed, and this will be the steady stream here. So once you're a member of this meeting, you will receive those things. You can, in the topics folders, you can click on here and follow them. Now I'm following it, so that's why it's already set that way. But and then again, the sessions just for this meeting are all right here. So it's a place where you can post on the activity feed. You can pose a question up here, quick post or a question of your own. We'll be posting questions. And then you could do the same in the actual, in these sessions. You also have the opportunity to pose a question at the bottom. I guess not there, let's see. Yeah, at the bottom you can share thoughts on a session as well. This is also where each of these ones was where we'll put the recordings and the other handouts as we go along here. So with that, I'm gonna stop. We have about 9 minutes left. So does anybody have any questions right now about anything you've heard so far? Okay. With the time remaining then, I would like to go back for a second, and this question around, I'm gonna try to bring up my screen properly. This is the question you're gonna have posed to you, which is what are your primary goals for the Bonner program this year, or for starting one next year? And this overlaps with sort of why would you want to start a Bonner program for the new schools or the prospective schools? Nobody's really, I think, fully committed necessarily at this point, which is fine. As I've told all of you individually, anybody who's coming to this new, we really encourage you to have a Bonner program. It's a steep climb. But we also encourage you just to take this stuff and use it in a way that makes sense. So just for the, so that question will get posed, and there'll be questions throughout these days that you'll get emailed. We really encourage you to type a response so people can read each other's responses and get a little bit of a sense of the kind of thing we would do over a meal or a beer or something like that. it's a shame we're not together that way. A lot of the Bonner cultural stuff comes across that way. And it's as cool a group professionally as you'll be around. And just since we have a couple veterans around, Arlette, you just can talk a little bit about your experience in Bonner. And this is not meant to like say nice things about me and Ari and Rachita and Liz and that kind of stuff. Just about your colleagues in this program, not about.
Okay, I won't brag about you. I've been with Bonner for about 6 years now. And I think it's the best professional network out there. It provides so many resources for engaging everybody, students, community, faculty, even campus-wide, how to navigate all the politics and structures of higher education in a graceful way. But also there's like the most fun network ever. Like the people are so cool and they all sing and dance and have a talent, and we tend to drink a lot and go to bed really, really late when we meet. I'm one that always close the bar pretty much. But
everybody's a drinker.
Great. Let's not go there. Anyhow, so it's just a great place to be with people who share similar values, but also are diverse from both geographically speaking, ethnically, you name it. There's every kind of people at Bonner, but very smart. Everybody's like super smart and have so much to contribute. So I'm really, really happy to be part of this network. So
yeah, thank you. Jennifer, you've got multiple perspectives now. Can you just share a little bit?
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Jennifer Gonzalez. I am actually an alum from Guilford College, class of 2019. And yeah, I have the perspective of a student in the program, but now I have the perspective of someone actually working for the department. So I'm gonna echo what Arlette says. Just our whole community is very supportive, especially during these times and any time, honestly. Trying to figure out what's the best way to support our students and also just support ourselves. And take care of ourselves to be able to take care of others and our community members. It's been a really enriching journey so far, and it's only been a year, I believe. Yeah, almost a year.
Nice, nice. Liz, we're getting people just to say a few words. This is a little also by way of introduction. And so Liz was a Bonner at Centre College, where she left for a year or two to do organizing work, and then came back as a coordinator, and then we got her. And she's working on her master's, I think. And but Liz, from a student to staff perspective, how have you seen it? Like when you became a staff and saw it from the inside, so to speak. How did your perspective change about what we're doing here?
Yeah, how did my perspective change? I guess I'd say it really helps to see like the campus-wide impact and the academic connections. Like it's so much more than the individual Bonners and the students that you're working with. I think as a staff person on the campus or a student in the program, you're really focused on your students and your program. But when you back up from that, you see that Bonner is really trying to change a campus, right? Change a community for the better. And I think that is so powerful and something that is really unique for this program. And just the growing in the relationships. I mean, I have met some of my closest friends through this program. I have a fellow Centre Bonner alum actually on this call, Emily, who's now the new director at Notre Dame. So yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful community, and echo what Arlette said and Jennifer said. They're both fantastic people. We're lucky to have them in this community. I don't know if that answered your question, but there you go.
You know, I guess if there's a key thing just to convey in this aspect, that the community we're in, and this is a staff community, it increasingly has faculty more and more in it. Lots of students who then go on to run the programs, and I don't know when our first college president will be, but that's going to happen too. Our oldest bonder, remember we're 30 years into it, right? I think there's a couple things. One is it's a very easy group to be around. It's a fun group to be around. They're very helpful. Everybody will bend over backwards if you have a question. Nobody takes the new kid on the block and says, oh, how come you don't know that already? So all that kind of stuff that happens. I think I have heard some people say when the face-to-face gatherings are happening, some of those tables, those guys really know each other and they kind of wish they were over there with them, but it takes a little while to break into it. But I think that's, it doesn't take all that long to break into it. The second thing is that 30 years into it, I think we're still, at least I feel this way, and I know the staff do, pretty impatient to do it better. And that we're pretty much thinking about what's the next thing we need to, take on. What COVID's done is accelerate some things we were doing anyway. This online platform and trying to figure that out. We were trying to figure out how do we have a stronger community that's interacting throughout the year, not just at our face-to-face gatherings, which are typically for you guys twice a year, in addition to this meeting. And the same for students. But the other thing around doing more capacity building work, which you can largely do remotely, a lot of stuff around faculty and pathways as schools are looking more to be more career, real world focused, that fits in. And so it's accelerated stuff, but we're not a group that sort of, we've got it all figured out. We've gotten here and aren't we happy with ourselves? And that's the energy you're going to get in terms of, we can't tell you in most cases what to do. A couple things we can really push you hard to do, but most of it's sort of persuading you and having your colleagues persuade you by the cool things they're doing, whether they're students or staff or faculty or even senior administrators, and sort of talking about how they're making stuff, their stuff happen. For some of the new schools here, I think that one of the most complex questions is not sort of how to do the mechanics of starting Bonner, but how to fit it into the rest of what you're trying to do. Where to house it, how to leverage it. It's great to hear University of Nevada, Reno is looking at restructuring. I'm hearing that from other folks as well. Some of the new schools that I've talked to about their interest in Bonner, a lot of the conversations end up being about, well, how does it fit? Or where do you see it fitting? And those comments about the directors being all those things, political strategist being one of them, fits into that part of what we're trying to do. So I'm really glad you're all here. This is a week ago, the group wasn't going to be this big. So I'm pretty thrilled that there's other people willing to show up. We'll see you again tomorrow. You'll get this question posted. Maybe already gone out at 12:30. I'm not sure exactly what Chaita timed it.
That's 12:30.
Okay. So very good. I wish you all well. I didn't see any questions on the chat, so I'll take that to mean you've got a good opening session. Be well. Take care. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Welcome.
See you tomorrow.
Tomorrow.